everyone. Welcome to another edition of Valley Sports Rewind. I'm Mike Cannici, and today I'm delighted to have a throwback football player from Seymour. He was an All-MVL selection in 2002. He's currently an assistant coach with Seymour for the past 4 years. He's had stops in Naugatuck and in Torrington, and he's also an assistant baseball coach with the Seymour staff as well, Mr. Jamie Burns. And Jamie, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Well, Mike, thank you. I'm very grateful and honored to be here and looking forward to this interview.
Now, James, if I'm not mistaken, when you were a little kid, you kind of grew up a little bit in Ansonia. Am I right about that? Or your father did, maybe?
My father was from Ansonia. I was probably the first house I lived in was there. I was born at Griffin Hospital. And then shortly, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, we moved to Derby. Then a short period of time, they moved to Naugatuck. But most of my... all my dad's family was from Ansonia, and my mother's family was from Ansonia going back to both sides. But she grew up in Orange. So, yeah,
right.
I was pretty familiar with the town. And my grandmother lived there up until her passing last summer. So I was, I never really lived there like during my school time, but I did all my school in Oxford.
Right. Now, let me ask you, you weren't originally a high school football fan right away, correct? It took some time?
It didn't take much time. I mean, Cable 10 was on at the time. I can remember the Sunday, the first re-air, we'd be watching it at my house. Everybody at Cable 10, if you lived in Oxford or Bethany or all those towns. So I can remember watching games and, being 6, 7 years old and not really knowing much difference between the Cable 10 games and the college games that I didn't know too much about. But I wasn't like into it probably till the middle 90s.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, your father would take you to high school games. He was a big high school football fan. He would go to different games, correct?
Yeah, he would. He would go to a lot of different games. He'd take us to majority of the time when my brother and I, who's 2 years older than me, were younger, we'd go to Ansonia. My father was in the car business, so Saturdays was his big day. He would wouldn't be able to go to the teams that didn't have lights. And about 50% of the teams probably back then didn't have lights. And Ansonia,
right.
They've had lights forever, so we would go to those games. And we went to a bunch of other games. He would be in sales. He knew a bunch of different people, so we go to a Shelton game here. And, I got the whole experience. It took me a little while to realize that there was the MVL and the Housatonic League and all the different stuff. But then
right.
you kind of picked up on it. Obviously, the Housatonic guys were always bashing the MVL. That's the way it goes. But that was... we went to a bunch of different games. When Cheshire was big, nobody was beating them. We went there. So, yeah, I got around, saw a lot of high school football games, that's for sure.
Right. Now, when did you start getting familiar with Seymour football? I know you lived in Oxford, but, were you a fan? They were big at the time when you were growing up. They had a successful program.
93 was actually the first familiarity I had with Seymour, not like the town or the school, but with their football success. Obviously, that year they won the Double S championship. I think they went 10-1. And then, when teams were having the successful campaigns like that, looking back on it, they were very good. They had other good seasons. Obviously, Coach Sponheimer starting there in 80 and then going back. So, 93 was the first year I got familiar with like Seymour and their presence, I guess, in the Valley. And that was also when you realized that, where you're going to be playing high school and all that stuff. So, yeah. I guess I would say 93. I went to my first Seymour game. I think it was a Sunday game. It was a rain out in 1991. My dad took my brother and I up to the Barber, on a Sunday afternoon. We went to Lyman Hall and Seymour.
Right.
Looked like Rams and Broncos to me. I was young back then. But
right.
That was the first Seymour game I remember seeing.
Right. Now, Coach Sponheimer, obviously, in that town, he's like a god. Were you like a big Sponheimer fan as a kid? Like, did you idolize the type of guy he was, or you really didn't care much?
When you knew you were going to be playing for him,
right? I
think you were a little bit more intimidated. Like you're like, okay, this guy he had that like whole dick bravado and the whole like, he just has an intimidating presence. You heard the stories and, you didn't really want to cross him. And, you had a lot of admiration for his success and the things you'd also heard. So, going into it, I wouldn't say I was the one thing I had with him was respect, and the other thing I had to say I was very he had a very intimidating presence. Going there as a freshman in the locker room, you really didn't want to set him off or anything like that.
Right. Now, when was your first year of football? What grade were you in? Was it eighth,
seventh
grade?
Going back to like 1997. So, and I was always a bigger kid at the time, but,
Right.
140-pound weight limit. So I played the midget football those 2 years. It was hard to get. It's not like it is now where they have unlimited weights. It was hard to get in there and play. And, my parents, my dad didn't really play football. I think he played like 1 year of his whole life.
Right.
And it wasn't like, oh, you got to get up. Some kids I know, they started playing when they were 8. So, I always wanted to play, but that was when I first started. So, I guess you could say that I was, I wouldn't say inexperienced, but yeah, that was, I probably looked into it by 5th grade, but then I would have been playing with kids 2 years older than me. I was probably eating a little too much McDonald's.
Now, one of the things that happens is you could be a big fan of a sport. You could be a big high school football fan. But then when you get on the field, you don't like it as much as a player. Did you like it right away when you were playing, or did it take some time for you to enjoy it?
That's a good question. I mean, I think you get out there and you're new to football. You'd like to be good at anything you try, but you also realize that, look, you're playing against kids that have been doing this for 4 or 5 years. It takes a little breaking in. And, I have to say, I was pretty determined at that point, and at all points in my life, I was going to be playing for Seymour. And, football's a tough sport. If I had to tell it to anybody who's never played before, the hits that you think you're looking at, they hurt, and it's a physical game, but that's also the fun of it. But, yeah, to answer your question, I got out there, and I knew that it was going to take some work. You got to work on your leverage, your bending, your techniques.
Right.
It's all part of the process, just like any other sport, except I think with basketball and baseball, you start a little earlier.
Right.
There's other sport too, soccer, like where you're out there very young age.
Right.
Football, you don't start till you're about 8. And I was playing, like I said, against kids with 3, 4 years of experience. So there's a big jump if you're putting your full effort in between, I think, year 1 and 2 of football.
Right. Now, did you enjoy other sports, or was football your main one? I mean, did you have another sport that you liked more than football at the time, or was it basically football?
Well, growing up in Oxford, I mean, basketball was big. You played biddy leagues. Those were super competitive. We would play, kids that we had one elementary school, so everybody, had their team, and it was like 3 grades. So you'd when you were 4th, 5th, 6th, or 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then the 6th, 7th, and 8th were the 2 levels. And I love basketball, man. There was we would play the games at the elementary school, Quaker Farms and Great Oak, and that was might as well have been Madison Square Garden,
Right.
So I love basketball growing up. I think everybody loves basketball. I think basketball actually is the sport that requires the most athleticism.
Right.
I mean, think about it. To become a pro basketball player, most of the time you got to be tall, but basketball was my first love. Baseball, I enjoyed playing. Not nearly as much though. You needed equipment. Took a little bit more paying attention.
Right.
There's a lot of standing around. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed playing Little League, but definitely biddy basketball in Oxford, and then wanting to play for the Great Oak basketball team, the middle school team.
Right.
We had a lot of good players before me, a little bit older than my brother, in the neighborhood that played at Great Oak, and they would go to various different high schools, not just Seymour, because of the fact Oxford at the time didn't have a high school. So Great Oak basketball and biddy basketball. Yeah, basketball was probably my favorite sport till about 96, 97.
Right. And one of the things, too, is, Pop Warner, I've always said this, that's where you're learning the technique of the game, the hitting aspect, things like that. Because when you get to high school, coaches can't always focus on teaching you how to hit and teaching you technique. They have to do a lot of other things. So really, Pop Warner is the most important time if you're going to learn the game.
I can't disagree with you, Mike. I think not only is it the most important time for fundamentals, I think Pop Warner's where, with these younger coaches, you have to encourage a love for the game. Football's not going to be easy for young kids. It'd be nice if it is, but there's so many more valuable things to football besides just on-the-field success or making tackles, making blocks, gaining yards, catching passes. There's that camaraderie. There's that the process of football. There's nothing like getting ready for a game that week and everybody's focused on the same goal. I think that the youth coaches not only teaching proper, safe tackling in this era of awareness with, obviously we all should be with head injuries and all that stuff, but also just getting the kids to love the game because it's not a sport where, the whole thing is great. A bad practice for basketball is a little bit easier than a bad practice for football.
Right.
Basically, I'm not knocking any of the sports, but I think the fundamentals of football, and I think the fundamentals of the schemes you're going to be running in high school, I think you're starting to see youth is way more tied in to these successful programs than it ever has been before.
Right. Now, after the 2 years of Pop Warner, you're heading to high school in 1998. How did you think you were in those 2 years? Did you think you still needed a lot of work? I mean, were you confident at least that you understood the game, or did you think you were raw when you got to be a freshman?
I definitely think I was raw, and it's funny you bring that point up. At the time, Seymour was we had about 1,000 student enrollment, and we had a lot more. We had like 26 or 27 freshmen,
right?
Around 30, I would say, maybe to start. Who knows? On our team now, much smaller, about half that enrollment with Oxford not there, and no more Region 16 as was the Woodland High School. I don't know if I ever thought I was raw, or you were just worried about getting a starting position or two on the freshman team. You had at least I did, a competitive mindset where you, and one thing about the staff at Seymour when I was there with Sponheimer, Kello, Coach DeMarco, all the guys, they kept you very humble. You one day to the next, you were trying to, Spoonie always had a saying, you're always being evaluated. So to answer your question about that, I think I just thought from one day to the next, if they said get at will end or strong tackle, I just wanted to get my hands on the guy, keep him off the linebacker and close. It was like a day-to-day thing. We were very caught up in that. But yeah, I did stress in the offseason competitively, even I remember doing push-ups and sit-ups and running and doing any extra things I could to get a starting spot or be the best you could be. That was the culture. So yeah, I was always raw. I always felt like I was raw.
Right.
I never felt like I had arrived.
You mentioned Oxford. So your freshman year, you're meeting a lot of new kids. I'm sure you knew some from Pop Warner and stuff like that. But basically, it's a lot of new kids you got to get used to playing with and things like that. How did that transition go as far as, playing together with guys you had never really known before?
I think the transition went well because at the time, we all just kind of fell in line. We had Danny Dunay and Ray Nappy were the freshman coaches, and you had guys like Frank Warecki that were running the freshman programs at the time. And there was, as far as that went, there was not like a split rivalry. There was the Oxford kids knew each other a little bit better than the Seymour kids. And you knew about half the football players because, let's face it, we had about 20 kids per Pop Warner team.
Right.
So but then you had some kids like that came out that you'd never met, or you were just familiar with the name. So you got to meet them. But I think the best part about it was the competition. You look at Oxford and Seymour now, they play one another. They field teams of 40 different guys. You put those grades together, you get 25 kids. They're fighting out for 11 spots. That's great competition. So you had a lot of competition. You weren't coming in and it was like, oh, if this guy misses practice, I'll be starting. You had to work. So it created great competition. I don't think there was a rivalry between the Seymour and Oxford kids so much. I just think that extra extra school there coming in, it pushed you. It had to, naturally.
Right. Now, Coach Sponheimer, legendary coach, but one of the things that stands out to me about Coach Sponheimer, more than his record, more than his wins, is the program he runs. And he doesn't care if you're Emmitt Smith or you're Deion Sanders, whoever it might be. If you abuse the privilege of playing for that program, he'll throw you off. He was never afraid of that. And he doesn't give you that chance to come back because in his eyes, it's a privilege. Talk about freshman year when those coaches sat down with all you guys and told you what's expected about this program. What was that feeling like? Were you nervous, or did you say, this guy's got it right?
Well, you had heard previous about Coach Sponheimer, and I would say that how thorough of a program he ran, and you would hear, and just the way that he told you. He said football's not for everybody. That was kind of a big thing,
right?
And you had stories going back. He had his second year as head coach in '81. I wasn't even born yet, but he dismissed 7 starters from the '80 state champs, and then went 0-10. So you hear those stories and going forward, and you just knew that this guy didn't play. He had a way to do things.
Right.
You were gonna wear black cleats. You weren't gonna have jewelry. I never had jewelry or tattoos. Still don't. But no earring. Well, that didn't concern me much. But it's funny you say that with the no earring. Here I was in my senior year of high school. I'm on the second floor at Seymour High, where Coach Sponheimer taught, obviously. And we had a kiddie transfer from St. Joe's. He had to sit out like the first 4 or 5 games. I don't know what the rules were then.
Right.
And he had a little earring in. First day of school. But he never wore it, during the weightlifting or any of the practices.
Right.
And you just hear Coach Sponheimer barking at him. Do you play on this team? Do you play on this team? And I turn around. I see this kid, Sean. He's like, yeah. And he goes, what is that? And he's grabbing the base of his ear, wiggling it. And he's like, get it out. So yeah, you knew how strict he was. You knew how his expectations were, and you knew that, you might necessarily, as a youth or an adolescent, understand what he was upset about, like all used to. But you knew that you would have to either fall in line or find something to do. I remember seeing 10 to 15 very, very quality players go out the door at Seymour. He didn't bat an eye. And I'm not trying to say that, listen, there wasn't some players that he wasn't willing to work with. But if you were going to push him, if you were going to skip him and kind of tell him where he would literally clean your locker out in a second, you saw it. And that was something I think that went a long way towards us knowing that, he was the ultimate boss.
Right.
And I don't know that coaches these days could run operations like that. Maybe some places, but I don't know that, the rules that he said to you on your show, you said to him, what's the first thing that would be different if he was a coach? He said he would need a lawyer. I mean, he just, it was in word. He says, you knew he would clean your lockout. I mean, you saw it.
Right.
He cleaned it. I can't remember the dude's name. You just saw it, and it was cleaned out the next day. It belonged to him. That was what he said. So I thought that was great, though. It just kept you in line.
Right.
365 days, basically, you were a Seymour football player for him. And it certainly kept you in line and held you to stand. I don't know if all high schools were like that.
Right. How would you say your freshman year went for you personally? I know the team, I think, did okay, but how would you evaluate that first year as a Wildcat?
Always a lot of fun freshman year. Always. You're playing a lot of games. You're learning the system. You don't yet have a lot of pressure on you.
Right.
I think when you're in ninth grade, you're playing against other ninth graders, you're starting to really get a feel for what Seymour football was. And I think freshman year, a lot of people will tell you that's the most fun time. Right. You're not going to like freshman year. You're not going to love this game. So
right.
I thought it went very well. I thought the coaches were fine. They're not yet fully. You're not fully acclimated.
Right. Were you nervous sophomore year, that first day of practice in the spring?
Yeah, you get there. I mean, the first day of no pads, I was never nervous about.
Right.
Stances for the linemen, at least, stances, a couple steps. Here we go. It was that first, we used to do the 5 days with helmets and jerseys. It was that Saturday. You'd know Spoonie would have that gray T-shirt on. He'd have a little stain of chew juice. Kello would have a Marb going. And, well, maybe a Marb or 10. And, we'd do Oklahoma drill. We'd be cranking. Everybody's intensity was up. And we'd be doing triples, We'd do a triple or a double. And, that was always the one that you were, nervous about because you knew the other guy was going to be bringing it. You can only as good as the guy you're practicing against. And those same dudes were waking up in the morning saying, for that 8 a.m. practice, saying, I got to bring my A game. So, yeah, that was the first practice. I mean, those first 5 days were more about technique and execution. But that Saturday of pads, that's when the juices were flowing, The little dew on the ground. It's about 95-degree August day. That whistles too, and somebody was getting chewed out, me, for whatever. But, yeah, that was sophomore years where you really learned that these guys are stronger than you. And, that's also where you learn how to be a player, I think.
Right. Did you come out of your sophomore year, though, feeling good about what the future held for you? I mean, were you optimistic?
No, I think there was a lot of pressure coming out of sophomore year. I think, for me personally, I think that the team had made, there was personally, I should say, I'll address that first. I wanted to start as a junior. I think, starting as a sophomore is often difficult.
Right.
And that's where you have to probably beat out seniors or other juniors. And that's when you hit the weight room hard. So I would say coming out of sophomore year, you knew now, playing some sparse time as a sophomore, but this is where you got to really dial it up. Get in the weight room.
Right.
Yourself to be as strong as everybody. And then, not just start to start. You want to start to be an NBL champion, a state playoff team, which you would eventually become. But, yeah, those that was personally the time where you felt you validate yourself being a starter as a junior or whatever. But so coming out of sophomore year, the pressure was on personally, and then I think the team too.
Right.
We had droughts. But then, you win the NBL championship next year, win a state. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are good pressures.
Right. And you guys did win the NVL, I believe, that next year, 2000.
Yep.
Correct? Yeah.
In 2000, then we won it. And then in 2001, we came back with all the expectations. 2000 was the team, the season of the Road Warriors. Remember when DeBarber Field was under renovation.
Right.
And we had a tremendous defense. We lost the opening game of the season, Cable 10 game. I had a lower leg injury, so I wasn't there. Although
Right.
Ed and Buddy gave me a little shout out if you watch the game. Not that anybody's having any time for that. I was on crutches. I had a very bad high ankle sprain. I heard it the day before Newtown. We ended up losing that game. We were up 12-0 at halftime. We lose 16-12. We win the next 9 straight, including, obviously, a big win over Ansonia at Jarvis
right.
Stadium. We beat them 19-12. Great win. Anytime you beat Ansonia, it's a great win. And that was, we also beat Naugatuck there. Both
Right.
those games were Cable 10 games. We had sophomore quarterback Joe Deptula. Sophomore Matt Tursky scored
Right.
out of my class. And then you had a great defense led by Justin Pepe.
Yes,
who was
good player.
seniors.
Yeah.
And, that year was the hardest on everybody. I think even if you talk to the juniors, that usually everybody says sophomore year, we didn't have a very good offense. We had a young quarterback, we had a young line, but our defense really brought it. And we knew we were going to win low-scoring games. And I can remember losing the opener, and they just were all over us Wolcott Week. I mean, Kello made the guys run. I was injured, and I still was feeling the pain, but he made them run a certain play. I want to say it was, slot Y, 19 drag, about like 30 times.
Wow.
And he kept asking who was making the mistakes. So that ended up leading to 9 straight wins, and then we went up to Bloomfield and got waxed there. But, yeah, that season was great. And then the next year, though, it was like as soon as we got off the field with Bloomfield, they beat us 51-8. It was like right away. Oh, Seymour's got a lot back. They're going to win the championship. So there was like that pressure.
Right. And it really didn't materialize the next year. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you'd kind of sat out that season, injuries, whatever the case was. So now we get into 2002, and you had a lot of pressure on yourself. You really wanted to be on that field. You guys open up against Shelton, and let me ask you, do you guys think you were overconfident in that game? Because I think you guys felt like you were the better team going into that game. Am I correct?
I definitely thought that Shelton could beat us. They'd come off of 01 season. They played in the SEC.
Right.
They were 9-1 in 2001. They had 2 great players that we knew of, Sam and Gianowski.
Right.
They had the Zarnecki kid at running back. And I remember watching the Cable 10 games of Shelton. They would blow out Cheshire. They blew out Derby.
Right.
And seeing what they had coming up because, it's a little bit easier in the NVL to tell what somebody's got coming back. So I knew Shelton was going to be very good. We're playing them at their house. They just scrimmaged Ansonia. That was the game scrimmage we watched a film of. And Ansonia beat up on them pretty good.
Right.
Ansonia was running the veer. It was 2002. They had the Thomas and Tinney as juniors.
Right.
And they were
great
gashing
team.
them.
Great
right?
team.
And we had pounded Brantford. We always game scrimmage Brantford. And this wasn't the quarter and a half and the quarterbacks over there shaking everybody's hand like the scrimmages are circa 2017 and 2016 where everybody's worried about, we played 3 quarters or 4 quarters of full game scrimmage.
Right.
I mean, with uniforms. So we went up to Brantford. We had a lot of confidence. We had about 16 starters back from the 01 team that lost to New Canaan in the Class M championship.
Right.
And we felt going out of league and opening with Shelton that we were going to make a statement on the road. And I remember being at the Wolcott Derby game the night before.
Right.
And our left guard, great player, John Harkins, we had seen Shelton wearing "They Will See" shirts, and we thought they were kind of Seymour. We thought those were a shot at opening the 11th game season with us. And John Harkins was their then line coach was up in the bleachers, and he yells to Dan Dunay, "We're gonna kill their linemen." And he was talking to the Shelton line coach at the time. So I think that Shelton probably accused us of being overconfident, but we were not. We had a lot of respect for them. We knew that was going to be a tough game. I thought we could win. I thought we were as good or a better team. And I don't want to say it bared out in the game, but it was a Cable 10 game. It was about 90 degrees. It was that first week of the season.
Yeah.
And they got up 28-7 on us. I mean, they punched us right in the mouth. And that's what good teams do. That game I have to say I have a lot of regret about because I just felt it wasn't overconfidence. I just felt
it took you guys a half to get going, pretty much.
Our Coach Spineheimer said we didn't play for the first 22 minutes. He's probably right.
Right.
I don't know what happened. I know that there was a third down and they cut the ball back. It was a great game. I mean, a lot of excitement. The game was like 3 hours with all the plays. And it was just one of those games like, the momentum hit. Boom, boom. We had a ball ripped out on an option. Deptula and Tursky were in there. And, we were reading the defensive tackle. He closed, and it was like bang, boom. Next thing you know, it's 28-7.
Right.
And then we got back in the game, and we had a chance to tie it. I remember, Johnny Johnson, his father was the coach at Amity. He was first-year assistant on that team. He'd come over from Amity. And we were all talking about 3 or 4 years ago, and now he coaches us at Seymour. And somebody says, Johnny, what was your most memorable moment coaching high school football? And it was weird because he said that game, the 0-2 Shelton-Seymour game. And somebody says, what do you mean? He says, when Glenn Samaji went to sneak the ball on 4th and inches, and it was 35-28 Shelton, and we had cut the lead.
Right.
He said that, we blew up a pile and drove him back and stopped him short. And he said at that moment, he was like, oh, my God, we're going to win. And he said, there was like 3,000 people, and I remember the moment because I was playing in the A gap there. So I remember the sneak getting stopped. But when he says that, there was a lot of to go from 35-7, and that's 35-28, and it's rocking and it's rolling. To not finish that comeback was that was disappointing. But I don't think we're overconfident. I don't think there's anything wrong with confidence.
Right.
I think that I don't know what's that. I think we didn't. I don't think we all 11 guys on all sides of the ball brought it, and I think Shelton was very motivated. I think being made the underdog, a team that like I said, they went 9-1, and then the previous season they had gone undefeated with Orlowski, so they had done a lot of winning.
Right.
99, 2000, 2001 at Shelton, and they were looking forward to opening us. And I think like I said, we were overconfident, but I guess you could say that Shelton at that time knew how to win, and they showed that in the first half and at the end of the game.
Right. Though, a lot of times a team loses a game like that, and it could do one of two things. It could either spark them to make sure their season isn't ruined, or it could ruin a season. It didn't ruin your season, and in fact, you guys later in that season had a tremendous game against longtime rival Naugatuck, and I think you talk about punching people in the mouth. You punched that team in the mouth, beat them, I want to say 56 to maybe 20. I could be wrong, but and you had a great game that game. I think you had 2 or 3 sacks. So talk about that game a little bit.
Well, you fast forward to the next game. We played Holy Cross. Holy Cross had, remember, beaten Cheshire.
Right. Yeah, that was
shocking. And we saw Holy Cross, and it shocked everybody.
Yeah.
We had scrimmaged Cheshire on Labor Day, like in 10 plays. And we said, okay, we're going to whack these guys. And we kind of went down the line, and Naugatuck had beaten us in 0-1. So we're 5-1. It's the Cable 10 game. And Naugatuck had beaten us the year before, and they beat us a close game, 26-21.
Right, good game.
Yeah, that was a Cable 10 game, too. Daryl White threw the ball 2 yards over the line. They didn't call it.
Right.
Our DBs came up. I mean, they outplayed us. They had some great players. That loss kind of sent our 2001 team into a spiral. So they were coming up to Seymour. We were looking far forward to that. And you talk about just an avalanche. I mean, we were flying. They came out. They ran a trap the first play. I mean, we just blew it up. Joey Deptula ripped an option out. Tursky hit a toss pass. Then we hit a slant.
Right.
I mean, we were suffocating them.
I believe Tursky had like 5 touchdowns that day.
I think he ran for 4 and threw for 1.
Yeah.
We were up 56-0 with 7 minutes to go, and it was just one of those games that maybe wasn't that much of a disparity. I mean, we were better than they were, no question. But just the emotion we were playing with, and just everything was hitting right. Greg McDomino, great kicker. I think Buddy Chernovitz described it as, he wishes that his wedge shots in the golf course were like his kicks, that they were all pinning him. We were just flying around, and it was 56-0, and then Kello started calling fall down trap, to preserve it. That was before the Jack Cochran rule.
Right.
We could beat somebody 63, which we did. But yeah, that was a great win, Cable 10 game, and got us. It ended our Cable 10 curse. We hadn't won a game since 2000 on Cable 10. So
against Ansonia. Yeah, correct. Now, a great team. I mean, you talk about Deptula, one of the best quarterbacks Seymour ever had. I mean, just a tremendous player. I mean, that team had a lot of talent, but that team really worked hard. I mean, that team went out there week in and week out. I think that was a special class for Coach Sponheimer. Even though you guys didn't win the States, I think he really enjoyed coaching that team.
I think that class that I was part of, I think you had a lot of talent. Joey Deptula was a great winning player, dual threat quarterback. Before all this spread stuff, and the short passes, Joe's numbers were tremendous. Joe could throw and Joe could run, and he could really do both. And we ran the under center option, and we would throw from a drop back game, and he was able to do that. He particularly came on his junior year, and we had Matt Tursky.
Yes, yeah.
There was a kid, played Seymour football his whole life. He got bigger and stronger. Strong as a lineman, he could run the ball. Started off as a center, and then he just had tremendous straight ahead speed. Was an edge rusher on defense. You had a big line, guys like me, oversized kids for high school. John Harkins, I think he had a goatee when he was in 7th grade. You had Andy
Right.
Kastheimer, Tim Ellis, who actually transferred from his freshman year from prep. We had a massive line. You look at our line then compared to Seymour line now, or just about any line.
Big difference.
Yeah, much bigger. And we had a kid named Tommy Bell, tough inside linebacker, man.
Right, yeah.
Just your typical high school football player. Matt Bakiris, Beacon Falls kid.
Right. Yeah.
There,
A lot of good
would have been
players.
a Woodland Hawk.
Yeah. Had they been there,
right?
yeah.
And so would Hebert. Hebert was living in Beacon Falls at the time, and we probably had 3 or 4 starters just from there. Kevin Brown was a Beacon Falls kid. I mean, look at that,
Right.
there.
No, it was
very
a great
talented
team.
kid.
Yeah.
We didn't have we had so many skill guys. We didn't really have a lot to put, but that group worked really hard, and I think that group had a lot of pressure with the success we had freshman year to be a state champion.
Right.
And for that not to materialize was disappointing. It definitely was. But that group, I think, there was a lot of expectations going 9-1 as freshmen to win the state championship.
Right.
And we worked hard, but I almost felt like you said before, that Spoonie enjoyed that group, but it's hard to enjoy something when the pressure is to win.
Right. I agree with that. You guys ended up losing the state title game, I believe, to Staples, but the game before that was one of the best games, I think, in Seymour Wildcat history, and it was also the coldest game ever, in my opinion, and that was the game you guys played against Pomperog in the semis. Talk about that game and just talk about the cold that night.
Well, when you think about that game and any game played that night, whether it was in the Valley, it was immaculate, and Ansonia played down at Jarvis, but you
Right.
go to our Pomperog game. We're in the double M, class double M. They were the 1 seed. They won the SWC. We were the 4 seed. We'd go 9-2. We lost the opener to Shelton, and then we lost our last game to Ansonia. 28-20, hard
Right.
fought battle. And we had we don't play Thanksgiving, so we have to bye. Well, what happened was Pomperog High School is playing their Friday game because they played Wednesday night, Thanksgiving
Right.
Eve. The game gets moved. There's rain. They beat New Milford on a Friday. It's on a slushy field from snow. If you remember that 2002 Thanksgiving, I know I do. The night before, it snowed a pretty good amount. So that Friday after Thanksgiving with snow on the ground and the grass at Pomperog, they play. They roll the field.
Right.
Big problem, though. This huge frost comes in. And I'm not talking cold, okay? If you know the cold. It was 6 degrees at about 4:45 when we were going by Webster Bank on 67 in Oxford.
Right.
Or Seymour on our way to the game. It was like, when they talk about like that Giants, Packers 2007, or, that Chargers, Bengals, maybe not that cold, but it was like 2 degrees out. And I've never been so cold in my life. I'm doing
Right.
warm-ups. I came out with short sleeves. I was showing off the guns. And I had given the kid a long sleeves just in case. And I said, where is he? As soon as I was but the field was rock hard. Rolled. It was like a parking lot,
Right.
So we knew that they were going to be a double wing team, ground and pound. But this cold weather is like, holy crap. And
Right.
you hear anybody say, listen, I don't care how much you love football. You know the weather.
Yeah.
So we are freezing, Mike. I mean, I don't know if you went to a game that night or whatever, but it is cold.
Right.
Here's when I realized it was cold. During pregame, okay? I spit, and it froze to my face mask. And you're like, holy crap, This is
Right.
like Packers, Cowboys, 67 stuff. And that night, playing one way, a long drive meant a lot. I actually took my cleats off. I saw that the Pomperog linemen were all wearing sneakers, and they
Right.
were very cognizant of surface conditions. And as a lineman, I had these long cleats on from the last game we had played at Jarvis.
Right.
And I said, I'm getting these off. I put a pair of Air Jordans on, high top, So the skill guys still wear cleats. That game, I'd say, is an epic. In the cold, our camera actually shut down. There was no film.
Right.
Joey Deptula was able to get a copy later of the I want to say Cox Cable telecast from the Pomperog.
Right.
But that game is Arctic. I mean, it's 2 degrees. The field is a parking lot with ice. The people are frozen. The field is frozen. And they come out and they bang 2 scores on us. They get up 14-0.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And they're running, running their mouth. I mean, they were talking to Danbury News Times. They were saying, Seymour's played only 2 teams and, they've beaten them. And we're saying to ourselves, well, they've only played 1 team and they lost to them. They lost to Amity.
Right.
And, Pomperog was, there's a couple places down. There's, at the time, they thought they were hot stuff. They'd made the playoffs the year before. We were really looking forward to them. And when they got up 14-0, they started running their mouth. And Joey Deptula one of the great plays, not only in Seymour history, I've just ever seen. Wiggling out of a sack and just rolling back to his right. And he throws to Bakiris, and he makes it 14-7. And it was like everybody on the sideline goes up and down. It was like, we're winning this thing. We're winning this thing. You know, we're gonna get this through this. And just the weather. I mean, it was so cold.
Right.
You could feel your nose like red. And this isn't like going to cut the Christmas tree down cold. I mean, you're banging into dudes. They're running, super power, and you're taking on a double team, and you're just. It was, that's what they talk about football. I mean, I wanted to be on a warm bus, but I wanted to win too.
Right.
And I think Deptula's play there that changed the game. He was able to. I remember they had a great linebacker at the time. He was sophomore. Mike Kilt had him by the ankle. And he ripped out of it and wheeled to his right, and they couldn't cover for a while, and he just dropped it off, and you just see Bakiris with the snow behind him catch it. He was a great receiver, too. And it was like at that moment, I think they were our captain, 2 of our 4 captains. Bakiris and Tula got in the huddle. We were on defense, and they said, dude, we're winning this thing. And we 3-and-outed them. And that play by him, Joe, just set the tone. And a lot of people don't notice, but if they knew how cold it was, I think it was like 1 degree when we came out for the half.
Right.
Spoonie's mustache froze. Okay?
Right.
Kello actually sent one of our managers down because his lighter had frozen. He couldn't have a cigarette either in the school, so he was outside. His lighter froze because it was so cold. And there was a lot of stories that they had the heat zone on the sideline.
Yeah.
And one of our assistant coaches' gloves caught on fire.
Oh, man.
And it was like, like stop, drop, and roll. And everybody's like, what's going on here? So, do you get to that?
Okay, we had a technical difficulty there, but I think we have it worked out. So we're going to continue on with Seymour assistant coach Jamie Burns. Jamie, you talked about the Ansonia game, and I totally forgot to mention that. But you guys were down in that game 14-0, and then you guys came right back and tied it up 14-14. That was one of the best Ansonia teams of all time. Kenny Tinney, DeMontis Johnson, Thomas, yep. They had so many
players. Those guys, yeah.
Yeah, and you guys hung with them. You were the only team to give them a battle that year.
2 years, probably,
yeah. Talk about playing that game that night.
Well, anybody who plays in the Valley, Ansonia is the game. Whatever the case might be. You did an entire documentary on the Ansonia Derby rivalry. Here, Derby was playing in Housatonic, and Ansonia is such a great football program, such a great tradition. And that year, those guys were mostly juniors. They had a couple seniors, pretty talented players. They had Kevin Black, was a lineman, very good player.
Right.
They had linebacker that was pretty good too. That was a senior, but for the most part, they were junior laden, and they would end up winning 2 straight state championships. We go down there. They had lucked out. They played Derby as the out of league game. We played Shelton. So
right.
Well, ironically, actually, Derby beat Shelton that year. But so they're 9-1, or they're 8-1, and we're 9-1 because we're finishing the season.
Right.
Or no, they're 10-0, 9-0, as always. And we're 8-1, haven't lost to Shelton, but we were both undefeated in the league, so we're playing down at Jarvis. And as you know, Seymour and Ansonia agreed to play on a Thursday night.
Right.
Back when they started, because they felt like whenever they happen to play, either the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, the end of the year, that being on a Thursday night, it would allow other people to go see their game.
Right.
And other than cancellations, it's been played pretty much
on a Thursday night.
On a Thursday, yeah.
Right.
This past year, we played on a Friday because of the rain. So we go there. It's a Thursday. They're running the veer option. They haven't had to show a whole lot. And Hunt was the head coach, but Brockett was their O coordinator at the time.
Right.
I think it was his first full-time year as the O coordinator, second.
Right. Yeah.
And they'd been running Tinney and Thomas on that option, and we'd focused on it all week. And we knew they were going to try to block us and move us. We kind of game planned it up, and they come out, and they right away, they're running jet motion, and they're throwing screens on us.
Yeah.
They kind of caught us off guard. And Tinney was just such a fast player. I mean, he would get the corner. And the first drive, he hit a screen to DeMontis Johnson, who he cut back inside and then scored, or set up a score by Thomas. Actually, it was by Tinney. And then Tinney breaks a counter on a sideline. And I'm telling you, if there's 3 feet in the yard, we all know that is. He jumped like 18 or 21 feet in the long jump into the end zone. I mean, dragging one of our defensive backs. It was like a freak play. And he was just they got up 14-9. And then we were able to drive, and we got it back. We hit a couple passes. If you remember in that game, if you saw it, and I know I do, we were inside the 10-yard line. And we threw an interception.
Yeah, that was a
And
big
with our
one.
kicking game, we probably gave away 3 points there. Nigel Ingram made a great play and picked it off. But, yeah, so they got up 14-0. We answered, hit some passes, created a drive, and then the drive before the half, Joey DeTulo broke a long run down our sideline. Great call by Bob Kello.
Right.
And we tied at 14. I remember being at the half and saying this is anybody's game. But, by saying it was we were slowing down Ryan Thomas, who had dominated everybody, and we were trying to adjust to quarterback counter.
Right.
And it was Ansonia opened the half with the ball. They deferred. We were deferred team too.
Right.
And they come out, and it was a second play from scrimmage in the second half. And they came out in a formation we hadn't seen before, or much of. And like I said, Ansonia had no trouble winning their first 8 or 9 games that year.
Right.
And they had yet to throw a play-action pass where they'd put the ball in the fullback's belly. And, well, they saved it for this. Johnson was kind of usually in a wing alignment. He was in a slot.
Right.
And Tinney put the ball in Thomas's belly and play faked it. Not that Ansonia hasn't run play-action, power pass, but out of his veer set, this is the first time we'd seen it. And he split our coverage, and he didn't need a whole lot of room. But DeMontis Johnson made an over-shoulder catch, and it put him up 21-14. And it was the game of drives. Even though Kenny Tinney was explosive, he was going to have to earn it going down the field in our defense. And that put him up 21-14. I just remember, just saying, because it was an easy score. And we talked all week, no big plays. And, playing against Ansonia.
Right.
Limit the big play. Easier said than done. But when they run that pitch and they break it for gain, that's usually not a good sign.
Right.
So we'd given up the big play, the home run, and then they got us again. We hit a quick screen and we put the ball on the turf. We had about a 20-yard gain. Bakiris had one arm at the time and he poked it out. And the kid from Ansonia recovered it. They got the ball back. They hit the X pattern, of course. The post and the inside.
Right.
Well, whatever you want to call it, flag route, and. Then they get down in the territory, and DeMontis Johnson scores again. They had gone empty. They went empty out of, fullback, 2 wings, split ends.
Yeah.
They put the kid Thomas out there. First time they'd shown that. And they ran a jet sweep with DeMontis. And DeMontis Johnson cut the corner. I mean, you're trying to defend Kenny Tinney and Thomas, and here's DeMontis Johnson and all that great blocking, and the guards getting around, and he scored. And then they get a penalty. He's pointing up in the crowd.
Yeah.
They move the ball back. I'm like, okay, 26, 14. I'll take my chances with the way offense we have. And they go trips and they run like a flood route and they hit the extra point. So it's 28-14. We got it to 28-20. But they got the ball back and Tinney made a great play to run the clock out.
Right.
I mean, I'm about 6 feet tall. I think Cleats, I'm probably about 6.5 feet. And dude, Tinney jumped over me like he was Carl Lewis. I mean, we all had to stop. It was like a 3rd and 15 bootleg.
Yeah.
And he got the corner. Great player. And he just stepped up and got it. And they ran the clock out. Yeah. They beat us. It was disappointing, but I think at the end, I'm not going to lie to you. I knew we would be in the playoffs even if we lost.
Right.
That didn't make a difference. I wanted to beat Ansonia. So that was a tough loss. It meant that we wouldn't win the NBL title. It meant that we wouldn't beat Ansonia. And but I don't think it diminished our confidence as far as winning the state championship.
Right. And, the state title game, I mean, you guys unfortunately lost to Staples. Before we get to that, let me ask you this, though. You were told you're going to make all Naugatuck Valley League. I mean, for a player who started as a freshman raw and didn't really think he was much of a player, how did that feel for you when Coach Sponheimer told you had been selected for all MVL?
Well, I think I said earlier in the interview, Coach Sponheimer was a professional, not only a professional, but an expert at keeping you humble. And I think, now even still, he didn't tell us all state or all NBL or any of those honors till after the season was over.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't find out till the Monday after the Saturday night when we lost in the state championship game. So I wasn't really worried about that stuff. I don't want to make it seem like I'm not aware of it. I'd be lying to you. But I wasn't going out there and, trying to squeeze the B gap down or do that at the time so that I could make all NBL. You just I didn't really know the whole process, but when I found out that Monday, I mean, I wouldn't say eased the pain of losing the state championship, but it kind of validated my career. And I think it was a little different for me because I've been following high school football so closely for so long that, you knew that, I mean, it was an honor. And like I said, it didn't validate my career as far as maybe winning the state championship, but it validated your presence in the program. You come into the Seymour locker room as a young player back in that day, and maybe it's not the same tradition, but the all Housatonic pictures going back to 1955.
Yes, yeah.
And you wanted to be one of those guys in that picture.
Right.
You were quite, so to hear that you were picked for the All NBL defense, then, that you were going to be in those pictures forever in the locker room. Yeah, it did mean a lot. I probably, that was probably the one of the highlights of my career. So yeah, that was the Friday after the state championship. So going into Staples,
Right.
we had a lot of pressure to win, but we had scrimmaged them, remember? And always on Labor Day with Cheshire, and we knew they were very good.
Right.
And they that's another game, close, and they hit a big play action, boom, 4.5, and then they kind of wore on us. They had some very good linemen, triple option game, and they pounded it in, and they were able to take the lead. The one regret I have about that game is I think we didn't convert a fourth and short. We should have, and I think we had them stopped too. We had a ball,
Right,
a fumble,
right.
shotgun snap, and we should have made the play. Instead, they converted into a first down. So you lose to Staples there. I mean, you just look at the success they had. That was kind of the golden era for their program. They would later win, I think, 3 out of 4 state championships. So
Right.
That those 3 teams were who we lost. We lost to Shelton, who would win the state championship next year.
Right.
Had gone 9-1-0-1, had 1-0-0.
Right.
Ansonia, who has been good since ever.
Right.
And Staples, who at that time I think was the pinnacle of their program under Petraccio. They beat us. It was bittersweet that night getting off the field, though. It was. End of a program. You're the winningest class in Seymour history, but you don't have any hardware. Really,
Right.
like state titles. And it was tough. It was tough. Because guys like me who get the concept of football and stuff, it is about winning. Like Lombardi said. Winning isn't the only thing, you know what I mean?
It's not there. Yeah, it's not everything. It's the only
if you're that
thing.
into it, that
Right.
you want to win. So that was disappointing.
Right. Before we go, one of the honors I think meant a lot to you too, and I think it's one as a player you would love to receive if you were able to receive an award. You were given the Coach's Award at the banquet that year. Talk about that, because you looked up to Danny Dune, Coach Spooney. I believe you and Kello had a good relationship, so that had to be special for you.
Yeah, well, Keller and I had a good relationship because I didn't play much offense, so he didn't have to deal with me. Let's not make that out to be anything. I always, I would say always. I mean, I certainly wasn't playing with G.I. Joe figures. I wanted to be a coach, but I can remember watching the Cable 10 telecast, and Buddy and Ed would be interviewing the guys, and I said, "This looks awesome," Right. My first introduction to football was Valley High School football. It wasn't like the Giants and the Bills. So I did watch NFL. I probably watched more football than anybody in the world. But yeah, I can remember being into the film and stuff. When football season comes, I'm a little different than other people. I mean, I don't know if it makes that big of a difference, but I watched all the films like the coaches. We didn't have the huddle program back then. So I get a pass on my 7th period psychology class on Thursday, the day before the game, and I'd try to watch all the film that the coaches were getting back in the old VHS days.
Right.
And if we had Cable 10, I'd tape it. Always wanted to be a coach, always kind of follow what the guidelines were. Was worried about doing my job, but was certainly aware of what the other team's schemes were. Always loved that part of football, still do. Yeah, that was an honor to be the Coach's Award. I don't want to say I thought through what award I was going to get at the banquet, but I kind of figured, you go down the line, Joe was going to get the MVP, all that stuff. It was an honor.
Right.
I don't think either way, though, it steered me on my path to being a coach. I think I would have been a coach regardless, but that was a little neat honor, now that you mention it. I don't think a lot of people would have thought I would have been a coach, just if they knew me in high school, but probably if that award just kind of solidified to me that the coaches that coached me saw that there was a passion for football beyond just playing for me.
Right. Well, James, we're going to have you back on again to talk about your coaching career. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but we will have you on again. But I think what you're doing with Seymour to this day, here you are, you've been out of high school, I want to say 15 years now.
It's been too long, Mike, as
Yeah.
you can tell by my hair falling out.
But 15 years out, and you're still doing great things. You've had stops, like I said, in Naugatuck, Torrington. You even coached Pop Warner for a year. And now,
Yeah, that year Pop Warner with Walker Bowski's where, I felt like I was working for Chuck Knoll, But yeah, the 13 straight years now coaching will be.
Yeah, so, we're going to talk all about your coaching career when we have you back on. But I really do applaud you for the career you had at Seymour, the dedication and commitment that you put in, and I really thank you for coming on today.
Well, thanks, Mike, and I want to thank you for just keeping all this great tradition with the Cable 10 and the Valley football that, you've done a great job of keeping it alive. I think I've sent you some texts in the past acknowledging it, and I think preserving that historically, I want to just thank you, and you're more than welcome for me coming on, and I will more than look forward to coming back on again.
Well, it sounds good. And that was Jamie Burns, former Seymour player, now assistant coach for Valley Sports Rewind. I'm Mike Cannici saying goodbye, everyone.